Shalom from Israel to all of the Daystar viewers around the world. I'm Moshe Bar Tzvi, the producer and founder of Israel Now News. We at Israel Now News are dedicated to bringing you the full story and the truth about Israel from Israel. It's written in the Holy Bible when David said in Psalm 25:5, "Lead me in your truth and teach me, for you are the God of my salvation. For you I wait all the day long." And God says in Zechariah 8:16, "These are the things that you shall do. Speak out the truth to one another. Judge with truth and judgment to peace in your gates. And always search for the truth, and the truth shall set you free." John 8:31. I hope you enjoyed the program. God bless you from Jerusalem. Shalom, shalom.
Welcome to Israel Now News. I'm Erin Viner.
And I'm Rebecca Rand.
Our top story, the United Nations Office for the Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs, known as OCHA, has been accused of funding and building illegal Palestinian houses in Judea and Samaria. In a letter written to OCHA Undersecretary General Valerie Amos, Israel's ambassador to the United Nations, Ron Prosser, expressed Israel's concern over the organization's operations in the West Bank and the Gaza Strip. According to a diplomatic source in the Israeli government, OCHA is believed to have engaged in illegal building in Area C, the hotly contested region that Palestinians claim is occupied by Israel, that Israel refers to as its heartland. The source added that Israel suspects that the UN division has been using international funds to advance projects that lack permits, provide illegal housing to Palestinians, and falsify data of reports that were used to mislead the international community about Israel's activity in Judea and Samaria, which has assisted Israel's critics in their efforts to delegitimize the state.
U.S. Secretary of State Hillary Clinton visited the holy city of Jerusalem for the first time since 2010. Her visit included meetings with top Israeli officials such as Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, Foreign Minister Avigdor Lieberman, Defense Minister Ehud Barak, and President Shimon Peres. Israeli and U.S. officials have confirmed that Iran's rogue nuclear program dominated the talks between Clinton and the Israeli leaders. At a press conference after meeting with Prime Minister Netanyahu, Clinton said that the United States will use all elements of American power to prevent Iran from obtaining a nuclear weapon. She added that we will continue to consult closely, as we had on almost a daily basis between our two governments, to chart the best way forward for peace and stability for Israel, the United States, and the world.
Authorities in Cyprus have apprehended a Lebanese man who was allegedly planning a terrorist attack against Israeli targets on the island. The suspect has been identified as a member of Hezbollah, Iran's satellite army in Lebanon. He was arrested after tracking the movements of several Israelis and was found to be in possession of several documents, leading investigators to believe that he was planning to detonate an explosion aboard an aircraft or a bus, intending to kill as many Israelis as possible. Cypriot officials say that the information on the pending attack was provided to them from a foreign intelligence agency, and sources here in Israel have confirmed that the Mossad was involved in that investigation. Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu has accused Iran of being responsible for the terror plot by using the Hezbollah militant. According to the Israeli premier, this attempted terrorist attack was planned under Iranian auspices as part of Tehran's plan to perpetuate terrorism in the Middle East, other parts of Asia, Europe, and the United States, including the attempted assassination of the Saudi ambassador to the U.S. Netanyahu says that Israel calls on the international community to take urgent action against Iran for being the greatest supporter of terrorism in the world.
Despite the claim from international peace negotiator Kofi Annan that he and Syrian President Bashar al-Assad had come to an agreement to end the bloodshed in Syria, another major massacre has taken place, this time in the city of Tremesh. According to UN monitors, Syrian helicopter gunships opened fire into crowds of civilians. The Syrian opposition has reported that more than 220 people were gunned down, after which Syrian militiamen entered the city and slaughtered entire families. Terrifying accounts of civilians being burned alive and children's eyes gouged out in front of their parents are beginning to circulate, along with photographs of bodies in the nearby river, in trenches, and hundreds of bodies wrapped in makeshift shrouds. The United Nations estimates that more than 17,000 people have been killed in the uprising, which began 17 months ago. The International Red Cross has officially declared that Syria is now in a state of civil war. This distinction means that international humanitarian law now applies throughout the country. Until now, this status had been declared for the cities of Homs, Idlib, and Hama, which were hotspots of violence. The rules of war, which are enacted when international humanitarian law comes into effect, specifies the appropriate use of force to achieve arms and also provides a basis for future war crimes proceedings.
The U.S. State Department has confirmed that Syria is transporting its chemical weapons supply, which is believed to include one of the world's largest arsenals of cyanide, mustard, and nerve gases. Concern has been heightened that the movement of these chemicals potentially indicates that the Syrian troops may be preparing to employ the agents against their own people. Senior military officials in Israel have also cautioned that the weapons could be transferred to the Hezbollah or Hamas terror organizations to be used in attacks against Israel. Information provided by high-ranking Syrian governmental officials and members of the Syrian army who have recently defected have added to these concerns by painting a disturbing image of Assad as the Syrian leader becomes increasingly desperate to retain control of the Arab Republic. Former Syrian ambassador to Iraq, Nawaf Fares, described Assad as a wounded wolf who has been cornered. According to the most senior Syrian to defect, his former personal friend Assad has likely already used chemical weapons against civilians in flashpoint regions of Syria. In an interview with the BBC, Fares said that he is convinced that if further cornered, Assad would deploy his military arsenal to eradicate the entire Syrian people in an effort to remain in power. U.S. State Department spokeswoman Victoria Nuland said that Washington has repeatedly made it clear that Damascus has a responsibility to safeguard its stockpiles of weapons and that any Syrian officials who fail to meet that obligation will be held accountable by the international community.
The latest victim in a series of tourist kidnappings in Egypt is a Christian pastor from Boston. Reverend Michael Lewis was on an annual trip when his tour bus was hijacked by Bedouins in Egypt near the traditional site of Mount Sinai. There has been a wave of tourist abductions in Egypt, which has been perpetrated by the Bedouin community there, who uses their hostages as leverage against the Egyptian police. Reverend Michael Lewis, a woman from his tour group, and their tour guide were held hostage in the desert for 4 days. They were released to Egyptian security officials in good condition.
Assisted by research obtained by the Simon Wiesenthal Center, a British newspaper has tracked down the world's most wanted Nazi war criminal. According to the Sun newspaper, 97-year-old Ladislas Csikszentmihalyi was discovered living in Budapest under an assumed identity. As police chief in Hungary during World War II, Csikszentmihalyi was complicit in the deaths of more than 15,700 Jews who were transported to the Auschwitz extermination camp. According to the director of the Simon Wiesenthal Center in Jerusalem, Dr. Ephraim Tsurov, for the past 14 years, Hungarian authorities had knowledge of the Nazi criminal's presence, but permitted him to live in peace and quiet. Tsurov said that it is important for his center to have cooperated with the Sun newspaper, which invested large sums of money to track down and confront the war criminal, in hope that the coverage would increase pressure by Hungarian and world public opinion for the justice system to take action. This war criminal must be put on trial in Hungary, said Tsurov, to bring a degree of closure for the families of the victims, as well as the Jewish communities of Hungary and Slovakia.
The head of the IDF's military intelligence, Avi Kochavi, has addressed the Knesset's Foreign Affairs Committee in regards to the increase in attempted terror attacks against Israel from the south. He said that since the Muslim Brotherhood came to power in Egypt, the terror threat to Israel has increased, and at least 10 attempted terror attacks originating in Egypt have been thwarted by the IDF. Kochavi also briefed the Knesset on the situation in Syria, saying that he does not believe that Assad will survive the uprising. He said that the opposition fighters in Syria are being reinforced by al-Qaeda terrorists. These terrorists could mount an attack on Israel from the Syrian side of the Golan Heights. Regarding Iran, the IDF chief reported that the Islamic Republic has shown no signs of letting up on its nuclear program, and that the IDF is carefully planning for the possibility of a harsh reaction if America or Israel were to preemptively strike its nuclear facilities.
That concludes the news portion of our show. Please stay tuned for Ask the Source with Josh Reinstein.
Hello and welcome to Ask the Source. I'm your host Josh Reinstein, and we're here on a beautiful day in Jerusalem on our rooftop studio. Our guest today is Jonathan Bash, founder of FreeMiddleEast.com. Jonathan, thank you for being on the show.
It's a pleasure.
FreeMiddleEast.com talks about the human rights violations in the Middle East. How important is that issue today?
Well, that's a very, very important issue, and it particularly affects Israel because this has been a significant weapon against Israel over the last 30 or 40 years. Prior to that, the attack on Israel was more vociferous, perhaps more akin to the way that Iran speaks about Israel. And there was a policy shift, a deliberate attempt to attack Israel from a human rights perspective. And the irony is that Israel has the best human rights record in the Middle East.
Yeah, Israel probably has the best human rights record in the world, not just the Middle East.
Potentially.
We see on the university campuses this cry that there's some sort of apartheid state in Israel, yet the real apartheid is religious and gender apartheid in the Arab communities around us, in the 22 Muslim states. Why is there such a discrepancy in how the international community sees Israel and what's really happening on the ground here?
It's a fantastic question. The truth is, it's actually a brilliant tactic. They push against us, push against Israel, vis-a-vis human rights, and it puts us on the back foot, which makes it very, very difficult for us. But we actually have to push back on the human rights front. I'll give you a fantastic example of two parallel truths. The first one is that if you look at the Palestinian right of return, that's something that gets pushed against Israel all the time. Israel must take in millions of Palestinians. Now we know the reality is that will swamp Israel and destroy the country. And we make that argument, and that's true. However, there is an equal parallel that the Palestinians in Lebanon, in Jordan, and in Syria are having a really hard time. They haven't got human rights. They're not even allowed to have jobs in most cases, and they're not allowed to leave their camps. That is an area we should be pushing on. They should be given citizenship. They should be treated like human beings.
Well, look, there's so many different areas that we can look at. You can look at gender rights. You know, in Israel, we've had a prime minister that's a woman. Men and women fight side by side in the military. In most of the 22 Arab countries, women can't even show their face in public.
That's true.
Yet we see on the university campuses and within the media that radical Islam and the liberals are kind of joining forces against Israel. Why are they turning a blind eye to all the human rights abusive in the Middle East?
That is the great question. It's actually known as the Red-Green Alliance, where you see the leftists around the world and you see radical Islamics around the world somehow joining together. And it's a kind of a human rights conundrum. How can the left, who should be on the side of human rights, somehow be on the same side as radical Islamics? It makes no sense.
And is there an answer for this? Because this is a question that is brought up all the time.
That's a very, very good question again. And I believe the answer really comes down to, one, there's perhaps a historical dislike of Israel. But you have to understand that Israel is the homeland to a religion and to a people. And if you look at the ideological left, take John Lennon. Imagine there's no country. Imagine there's no religion. This is what Israel is. And it's the opposite. It's the opposite to what they believe in. And therefore, that's where you get the commonality between the radical Islamics and the radical leftists.
One of the most impressive things about the website FreeMiddleEast.com is that you actually have a very large following in the Arab countries around the world.
Right.
What kind of impact does that have in the Middle East?
I believe that we are starting to educate Arabs, and Arabs are starting to see that human rights is something that goes across boundaries. It doesn't matter whether you're Jewish or Christian or Muslim. Human rights is universal. And actually, over half our members of Free Middle East are Arab. And that's an astounding statistic.
You know, one of the things that we see here in Israel is that we have complete freedom of religion here, yet in the Middle East, there are some places that if you bring a Bible into the country, it's a stiffer penalty than if you bring a kilo of heroin into America.
Right.
Is this one of the issues that you're taking on in freemiddleeast.com? Because religious freedoms really go hand in hand with human rights.
Absolutely. We look at religious freedom, we look at free speech, women's rights, minority rights. All these things are important, and we have to educate the West as to what is going on in the Middle East and to wake them up. And it's a huge issue, and perhaps the problem is with us in the West, that we're actually unbalanced on this.
Jonathan, there are literally tens of millions of people watching this show. What message do you have for our viewers?
The message I have for your viewers is that when you look at the Middle East, think of it in terms of human rights. Think of it in terms of universal values, which whether you're left-wing or you're right-wing are true, and argue in those terms that the Middle East is totally and utterly unbalanced, and we have to make a difference there.
Thank you, Jonathan, for being on the show.
It's a pleasure.
And thank you for tuning in to Ask the Source. I'm your host, Josh Reinstein. Now back to the studio.
Up next, Shining Light from Israel.
What makes the miracles of Jesus even more miraculous? Standing where they happened, in Israel. Come visit Capernaum, where Jesus restored a paralytic's helpless legs. Sail the Sea of Galilee, where Jesus walked on the water. Stroll through the Garden of Gethsemane, where Jesus healed a servant's ear. To learn more about standing where it all happened, in Israel, visit www.goisrael.com. Come visit Israel.
tuned for the ICEJ report from the International Christian Embassy in Jerusalem.
What makes the miracles of Jesus even more miraculous? Standing where they happened, in Israel. Come explore Jerusalem, where Jesus opened blind eyes. Visit the hills of Galilee, where Jesus fed the multitude. Stroll through Capernaum, where Jesus lived and taught and healed. To learn more about standing where it all happened in Israel, visit www.goisrael.com. Come visit Israel.
We are here outside the International Convention Center in Jerusalem. It is here where the International Christian Embassy presents every year the Feast of Tabernacles celebration. The Feast of Tabernacle has become a wonderful celebration of exciting worship and of the teaching of the Word of God here in the city of the Great King. Every year, thousands of Christians come to Jerusalem to celebrate with us this exciting Feast of Tabernacles.
One of the most amazing aspects of the Feast of Tabernacles celebration is to see so many nations coming up to Jerusalem every year to worship the Lord. The psalmist declared in Psalm 86, verse 9, "All nations whom you have made shall come and worship before you, O Lord, and shall glorify your name." As the creative and music director for the ICEJ, I have the privilege and blessing of working with an international team of volunteers, from musicians to singers to dancers, seamstresses, and technical and stage production personnel. Each of these people have a passion to worship the Lord and to glorify the name of Jesus. And it's always our hope and our prayer that the Lord will use us during the feast to lead the pilgrims who come into the presence of the Lord, and also to be a vehicle where the Holy Spirit can meet each person in their place of need. There are many opportunities to serve with us as volunteers during the feast, and if you're interested, you can find more information and even an online application via the ICEJ website.
This year's Feast of Tabernacle will take place from the 30th of September to the 4th of October. And I personally would like to invite you to join us for this exciting conference in Jerusalem. Find out more on our website, and tour options are available through the offices of our national branches around the world. I believe this year's Feast of Tabernacles will be a life-changing experience for you and for your family. Therefore, please prayerfully consider to join us at the Feast of Tabernacle in this year here in Jerusalem. May the Lord bless you out of Zion.
Now available from our online web store, the 2011 Feast of Tabernacles Highlights DVD. This wonderful 90-minute video captures highlights from the worship and teaching of the 2011 Feast of Tabernacles. Visit www.icej.tv for more details.
What makes the miracles of Jesus even more miraculous? Standing where they happened, in Israel. Come sail the Sea of Galilee, where Jesus calmed a raging storm. Experience Jerusalem, where Jesus restored a paralyzed man. Explore Capernaum, where Jesus spoke a centurion servant into health. To learn more about standing where it all happened, in Israel, visit goisrael.com. Come visit Israel.
You'll never be the same.
That's all for this edition of Israel Now News. I'm Rebecca Rand.
And I'm Erin Viner. Please join us again next week for all your Israel updates.